we are pleased to be joined by our first guest today, who is Mark Ridley, the owner of Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle, with us on the Oakland County MegaCast. Mark, thank you for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate having you on. How are you? How's your team over at the Comedy Castle been?
Well, busy for a while, cleaning, painting, sterilizing, doing the things that are necessary for if and when we get open this year. Right now, we're just down to one employee who works 1 day a week, and that's my general manager. But other than that, I'm here with this would be normally the time I would be booking all of next year. I get several hundred emails from managers, agents, comedians, and I've answered maybe about 50 so far saying, no, I'm not doing any booking until I know if and when we're going to be open. And I've talked to other people around the country. I'm part of a group of 15 comedy clubs around the country in Canada. Some who are open right now, others who have opened and closed after a week or two. So I'd rather just err on the side of caution. And if the governor says, okay, you can open at 50%, then I'll open at 50%. Anything less, I couldn't do it. So we're just waiting.
Mark, you've been in business since 1979. Are you worried this could be the end of what your business and the future of comedy for a while?
Well, yeah, my wife and I have talked about this. The good thing is that we're conservative with our finances. We left a lot of money in the account to pay the necessary bills. If I had to hold out, I could probably hold out and continue to pay rent and utilities until late next year, 2021. So, and I've also been fortunate in that I received the PPP loan, the EID loan, the largest grant that the city of Royal Oak handed out to 92 businesses. I received that too. So I'm confident that I can hang on until there is at least a partial reopening, and then hopefully following that a cure or vaccine that'll allow people to come back out. But I've put other measures in place. I've been doing some research, and one of the things that I can do, and I've spoken to the comedians and managers and agents about this, is that if I do open at 50%, a couple of the clubs are doing this where let's say they're charging $20 a seat to come in and watch the comedian live. Well, you can also sell a Zoom ticket at half price. So let's say you're sitting at home and you want to watch a show on a Saturday night, and for $10 you get a unique code that will allow you to watch the show at the Comedy Castle as it is happening. You can't pass that code around. So if you want to give it to your friends, you have to invite your friends over. So a couple of the clubs that I've spoken to said this has been very, very successful for them and allowed them to at least break even or make a little money, because they include the comedian in the back end portion of it with the Zoom sales.
Mark Ridley with us. He is the owner of Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle on the Oakland County MegaCast today. So, Mark, how have the comedians been affected by this pandemic? You interact with, of course, a lot of comedians, and you have over the years. How has the art of comedy and the entertainment of comedy been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I was speaking to a rather well-known comedian on Monday, and I find that the interesting thing is that a lot of the big names in New York and Los Angeles are moving to other parts of the country. In other words, maybe back to their home state. This particular comedian grew up in Michigan, so he moved back to Michigan. He sold his house and moved back to Michigan. Because there's just nothing happening in the industry for them, where you would hang out at the Comedy Store, the Improv, or the Comic Cellar. So if they were well enough off before the pandemic and had some money set aside, then they just decided to heck with it, and they moved back to their other house, or they sold their place and moved back to their home state or another state. So I think that's one big thing. I have two sons that are in the film industry, film and television. My one son sold a film to Universal, which was all ready for production and had everybody all lined up, and then the pandemic hit. So he's just spending his time working on a second film in Louisiana with his at his girlfriend's house. So he said, there's nothing going on in LA, so why be there? The restrictions are pretty tight. Of course, Louisiana's being hit pretty hard as well. But, I think that's the biggest thing. There are people that are just chomping at the bit. There are some bars that I've heard of around Michigan that are running open mic night. I cannot open. I'm considered a theater. And like most theaters, we're at the bottom of the ladder for reopening. So there are bars that are doing open mic on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Sunday, and just somehow getting around that issue of doing comedy.
So, what are your thoughts on reopening? We are seeing the casinos are now allowed to reopen, although at 15% capacity. Do you feel like you could reopen and maintain the safety guidelines recommended?
At 50%, we could, Ronnie. The room is all set up. I mean, we have the tables spread out. We have the adequate social distancing. There's a spot on the stage. It's 6 feet from the edge of the stage. And then the nearest table is up against the stage. So there's that portion is covered. But this particular person that I was at the club on Monday, and he walked around and he said, it doesn't even look like, that you've really taken that many tables out. We took all the tables and chairs out that were necessary, and we're at about 200 seats. So we're, I wouldn't do it if it was 25%. It'd have to be at least 50%. We crunched all the numbers, and it doesn't make sense to open at less than 50%. So I am busy not rescheduling, but postponing dates or canceling them outright until we know exactly when we can reopen. And there are some comedians, big name comedians, who just are not traveling. They've been given the opportunity in other states, and they said no, because of the pandemic, they don't want to travel.
Mark Ridley with us. He is the owner of Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle on the Oakland County Megacast with us today. Mark, many other artists, many other entertainers have moved their shows to virtual over the course of the pandemic. You've mentioned that many comedy clubs have either enacted or are considering enacting a partial in-person and partial virtual shows going forward, and that you've also considered that option for if and when it becomes prudent for your business. In terms of time elapsing, if your business does not reopen, and virtual means are potentially a way to bring in some revenue, would you consider potentially doing some virtual shows with comedians through Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle?
I have spoken to a number of my big name comedians, and they are not comfortable doing that. They almost need at least, let's say, 100 people in a room laughing to have some sort of feedback so that they feel comfortable doing a Zoom. The other problem with a virtual broadcast is that a lot of the comedians are getting ready to do, in the past, we're getting ready to do a Netflix special or some sort of a special. So they're trying out their new material to do this special. And as one manager told me, I don't want somebody sitting at home recording what is, break-in material and then put it out on YouTube ahead of the special. So I get that, and I understand it. And I have provided a number of virtual comedy shows for businesses, people in business that want to have some relief, something to do. So, there might be 40 people watching a comedian from their living room or basement doing a show. And as the comedian says, it's a very strange feeling standing there doing your act with nobody laughing. You can't hear them. You don't know what's going on. So I'll just wait until we get some sort of a partial reopening and I'm able to staff it adequately. And, we've only had 2 people say that they were not going to come back to work after this is all over so far. They went through, the guidelines of the PPP loan. So they went from making a lot of money in unemployment back to what they were making at the Comedy Castle, back to unemployment now. And so, that's a good thing. There is some loyalty there, but, that can only go so long. And, and I have notified all the comedians, agents, and managers that, quite honestly, the financial structuring, the travel, the hotel arrangements, everything's going to change. We have to work together on this because if I can't open at 400 seats, and they're not going to make what they used to make at 400 seats. So, and they've been very, very understanding. And if they say, no, I don't want to come in until you're fully open, and that's fine too. I mean, I'm not begrudging anybody because they're not making the same money they've made before. I've had a couple of comedians who are very big names that said, I'll come in no matter what, because they were used to working clubs and casinos and theaters. So casino shows, theater shows are really off the table for a long time. The people I know in the theater business say they're not booking anything until the second quarter of 2021.
Could this actually open the door for some homegrown comedians that are trying to make it in the business?
Well, I think, Ronnie, that goes back to what some of these bars are doing with the open mic night. I know that when I follow a lot of these groups on Instagram and Facebook, and there's a Michigan Comedy Association, and there are names, new people coming up all the time, just because they have the opportunity to go in front of a smaller crowd in a bar and see if they have the chops to make it as a stand-up comedian. I think it will provide more opportunities. We're one of the few clubs in the country that still does have open mic night at the club. A lot of them just go for, Wednesday through Saturday or Sunday with headliners and no open mic.
So, what about some of your classes that you teach? Could you do those virtually, maybe?
Well, we've discussed it, and the good thing about it is that the bad thing about it is that when you do the class, you have to get up and do your act in front of the teacher and the other students. So I don't see how that would work at this time. And again, we have completely cleaned out the club. It's completely repainted, sterilized, plexiglass is in place, all the PPEs in storage and sitting out. So I don't want to start having traffic unless we are able to at least break even or make some money and open those doors, because it does, each time somebody comes in, there is a lot of work to do after they leave.
Mark Ridley with us, the owner of Mark Ridley's Comedy Castle on the Oakland County Megacast. Mark, just a couple more minutes with you. Is there any other information that you'd like our audience to know, or those that are normally patrons of the Comedy Castle to know, or anything else that you'd like to touch on today?
Well, I mean, look, Royal Oak has been a great location for me. I've been in that particular location for 30 years. And just before this all happened, I renewed my lease for another 5 years. So, and I speak to my neighbors. The guy that owns the Royal Oak Brewery also owns Lockhart's Barbecue. And, everybody's struggling at this time. And I belong to an association called the National Independent Venue Association. And Senator Gary Peters co-sponsored both of the bills to raise $10 billion to save our venues. I think that the biggest thing is that when we do get ready to open the doors, and I've done a survey with our mailing list, be ready to come out. We're taking every single measure there is to maintain that safety, but 90% of small venues will close permanently if we don't get this money. So contact Senator Gary Peters, Senator Debbie Stabenow. Andy Levin is our representative in the Royal Oak District, and tell them to push for this money, because not that I'm looking for a huge chunk of it, but that $10 billion will help a lot of these venues like myself, like the Royal Oak Theater, like the Magic Bag. I mean, these are all venues that are part of this association, and without some financial aid, we're just like every other business. But again, we're at the bottom of the ladder, that lowest rung. We'll be the last to reopen.
Well, Mark, we appreciate having you on with us today.
Thank you very much, Tyler. Thank you, Ronnie.